So, you've got a Power Automate interview coming up, huh? Well, if you want to walk in there feeling totally confident, you've come to the right place. In this explainer, we're going to break down all the key concepts, the little details, and the big picture stuff that'll make you stand out. Let's get into it. Because that's the whole point, right? We're not just going to skim the surface. The goal here is to show that you're ready to build real-world, powerful, and reliable solutions. We're going to cover everything from the absolute fundamentals to the best practices that senior developers live by.
All right, first things first. We have to start at the beginning, lay a solid foundation. We'll look at what Power Automate actually is, and, just as importantly, where it fits into that whole Microsoft ecosystem. Getting this context right is absolutely crucial.
So, at its heart, Power Automate is all about one thing: automation. It's this cloud-based service that lets you build workflows to connect all the different apps and services you use every day. You can think of it like digital glue. It can sync files, send notifications, collect data, you name it. And the best part, it's all done with minimal or sometimes even zero code.
Now, this is super important. Power Automate does not live on an island. It's a key member of the Power Platform family. You've got Power BI for visualizing data, Power Apps for building custom applications, and Power Virtual Agents for creating chatbots. Power Automate is the conductor of this orchestra. It's what makes them all work together to create some really powerful solutions.
Okay, so now that we've got the big picture, let's zoom in and get into the nitty-gritty. We're talking about the actual building blocks of any flow. I'm telling you, understanding these components is completely non-negotiable for any interview.
An interviewer is almost definitely going to ask you about the different types of flows, and there are three main flavors. First, you've got cloud flows. These are your bread and butter. They can be automated, like when a new email arrives. They can be instant, like pressing a button, or they can be scheduled, like a report that runs every single Friday. Then you have desktop flows. These are for automating tasks right on your computer, which is perfect for those old-school legacy applications that don't have a modern API. And finally, there are business process flows, which are kind of like a guided tour for users, walking them through a standardized business process step by step.
Every single cloud flow really boils down to just two fundamental parts: a trigger and then at least one action. The trigger is the starting pistol, right? It's that one specific event that kicks the whole thing off. A new file gets added, someone clicks a button, you name it. The actions are everything that happens after that trigger fires. Sending an email, creating a file, updating a database record, those are your actions. Simple, right? One trigger, and then as many actions as you need.
Now, this brings us to a really important concept, especially when it comes to licensing and cost: connectors. Think of them as the pre-built bridges that connect your flow to other services. Standard connectors, for things like SharePoint, Outlook, and Teams, are usually included with your Microsoft 365 license. But when you need to connect to services outside that bubble, like Salesforce, or more advanced ones like Azure SQL, you're going to need a premium connector. And yep, that requires an extra license. Knowing this difference is a big deal because it directly impacts the cost and scope of a project.
Okay, we've got the basic building blocks down. Now let's talk about how to build flows that don't just work on a sunny day, but are robust and resilient. In a real-world job, it's not enough for a flow to just work. It has to be able to handle it when things go wrong.
Because let's be real, things do go wrong. An API might be down, a file might be missing, it happens. A great developer plans for this. In Power Automate, your number one tool for this is the Configure Run After setting. This lets you build a whole separate branch of logic that only runs if a previous step fails. You can also use scope actions to group steps together for easier error handling, implement a classic try-catch-finally pattern, or even use the terminate action to just stop a flow dead in its tracks to prevent bad data.
Let's dig into that scope action a little more, because it's awesome. Seriously, just think of it as a container. You can toss a whole bunch of related actions right inside it, and this gives you two huge benefits. First, it just makes your flow way cleaner and easier to read. Second, you can apply your error handling, that configure run after setting, to the entire container. So if any of the actions inside that box fail, your one error handling branch kicks in. It's super efficient.
Sooner or later, you're going to need to repeat some actions. And Power Automate gives you two main ways to do this. The apply to each loop is what you use when you have a list of things, like a bunch of email attachments or rows from a spreadsheet, and you need to do something to every single one of them. A do until loop is different. It keeps running over and over until a specific condition you set becomes true. For example, you could use it to check the status of something every 5 minutes until it's finally marked as approved.
And here's a pro tip for you. This one's all about optimization.
If you have tasks in your flow that don't depend on each other, you don't have to run them one after another. You can use parallel branching to make them run at the exact same time. For instance, you could be updating a SharePoint list and posting a message in Teams simultaneously. This can seriously cut down the total runtime of your flow.
Okay, time to level up. We're getting into the topics that really separate the junior developers from the senior ones. It's about making your flows not just work, but work efficiently, quickly, and securely. This stuff is critical.
Hey, remember that apply to each loop we just talked about? Well, by default, it doesn't just process one item at a time. It actually processes multiple items all at once. Concurrency control is the setting that lets you decide how many of those items run in parallel. It's this powerful little knob you can turn to perfectly balance performance and reliability.
So, what's the default? 20. That is a fantastic number to have in your back pocket for an interview. By default, an apply to each loop can process up to 20 items at the same time. Now, you can crank that number up for more speed, or you can dial it all the way down to 1 if you need things to happen in a specific order, one by one.
But here's the thing, it's all about a trade-off. Ramping up concurrency makes your flow finish way faster, which sounds great. But if all those parallel actions are trying to update the exact same file or database record, you can run into what are called race conditions, where they basically trip over each other and corrupt your data. Sometimes slowing things down to process sequentially is actually the safer, more reliable choice.
Security is just non-negotiable. You can't be putting passwords or secret keys directly into your flow actions. That's a huge no-no. Instead, you can use secure inputs and outputs to hide sensitive data from the flow's run history. You should always use environment variables to store your secrets. And at a higher level, administrators can set up data loss prevention, or DLP policies, to act as guardrails, controlling which services can even talk to each other to prevent data from leaking out.
All right, let's wrap this up with a few advanced topics. If you can speak intelligently about these in an interview, it's going to show that you have a really deep, practical understanding of how this platform works in the real world.
So what happens if your data isn't in the cloud? What if it's sitting on a SQL server in your company's own data center? Well, that's exactly what the on-premises data gateway is for. It's a little piece of software you install on a server on your local network, and it acts as a totally secure, encrypted bridge that lets Power Automate in the cloud safely talk to your data right there on site.
This leads right into the idea of modular design. Instead of building one single, gigantic, complex flow that's impossible to manage, you can break your logic down into smaller, reusable child flows. Then a main parent flow can call these child flows whenever it needs them, pass some data in, and get a result back. This approach makes your automation so much easier to build, to debug, and to maintain over time.
So, if an interviewer hits you with, how would you optimize a slow flow, this slide is basically your cheat sheet. And if you only remember one thing, make it this. Filter your data at the source. Don't pull down 10,000 records from SharePoint if you only need 10 of them. Do the filtering right in the GetItems action itself. Beyond that, keep your loops as lean as possible, use those parallel branches we talked about, and don't run a scheduled flow every minute if once an hour is good enough.
And there you have it. We've covered a ton of ground, from the absolute basics of triggers and actions, all the way to advanced concepts like concurrency control and security. These are precisely the kinds of things that interviewers are looking for. So the final question really isn't for me, it's for you. Now that you have this knowledge, what are you going to go build? Now go out there and ace these interviews.